everybody, it's Jessica, and this is VEDA Day 17. Today I want to talk about an article that I read this morning. NPR, Colorado Public Radio News posted in their education section this article called "Attention Students, Put Your Laptops Away." And of course that headline caught my interest, and so I was taking a look at that this morning, and there were a few things that really bothered me about this article, one being the title. If you read the article is actually in essence, talking about a study that was done about using laptops and typing your notes during a lecture versus handwritten notes, and the retention that students have in college classes based on whether they're typing or whether they're writing. And they cite one of the problems with that being that when you're typing, you tend to type verbatim, even if you're told you don't have to type every word. It's faster and it's easier to do that, and so you're not actually processing the content. Whereas if you're taking notes by hand, it's slower. And so they talk about how you're actually forced to sort of process that information and then determine what it is that you're going to write down, because you can't write down everything. And while I appreciate that, and there are definitely times where I use handwritten notes for things, like if I'm in a discussion or a meeting, I always have a pen and paper. And one of the reasons for that is that I really like just jotting down questions and things that pop up that I might not be able to actually share during that time frame, or someone might be talking or a lot of people are talking, and I know that it's going to be a while before I have a chance to ask that question or to share my thinking. And so I really jot it down so that I don't have to just be sitting there thinking about my question. I can really listen and make sure that I'm understanding the other things that are being talked about, but I also know that I've got that question or that idea that I can come back to when I'm ready, or when the group is ready. So I definitely am not saying that there's anything wrong with handwritten notes if that's what you prefer. And certainly, I use pen and paper quite frequently as well. But I think that the thing that I take issue with is that we're still writing articles and we're still posting things that have this very one-sided view and that take this assumption that lecture is just lecture and that's learning. And that's the thing that I really was bothered by in this article. They talk a lot about how more and more students are using laptops and bringing laptops to class. And, of course, they talk about it's so easy when you're on your technology to click over to Facebook and, be distracted. And they actually say something about, in a dry lecture, or I can't remember the exact quote, but it basically says, it says in a dull lecture, it's easier to click over to Facebook. And so I have a big problem with that, because if the lecture is dull, then like that to me is the problem that we should be solving for. We shouldn't be solving for, hey, student, you shouldn't be distracted. You should be really focusing on this boring lecture. And now granted, that's all in the eyes of the beholder. One person might find the lecture dull and the person next to them might be fascinated by it. I understand that. But for the most part, I think the thing we should be solving for is that students, whether they're K through 12 or they're college students, they should be engaged and actively learning in their classrooms, whether those are their college classes or, their 4th grade classes, their 10th grade classes. Like, students should be engaged in their learning and they should be active in the process of their learning, because if they're not active in what it is that they're doing, I personally don't really see how that learning is benefiting them. And, at the end of the day, I want students who are able to really think for themselves and who are able to, really be owners of their learning, because that means that they will always be owners of their learning. They're not, a lecture is very much this traditional idea of I'm going to come in here and sit and you're the expert and I'm not. And so I am here to learn from you and you are going to just give me all of the information that I need. And that's how I'm going to then be successful in life. And, maybe that's an oversimplification of what's going on there. But I do think that a lot of people fall back on that traditional kind of idea that lecture is lecture and you just need to learn how to, it's this idea that the students are what needs to change instead of the process of learning that needs to change, and the teacher that needs to change, and the institution that needs to change. And I really take issue with that. It really bothers me that we are still, in this day and age, with all the research that we have and everything that we know about learning and about really good teaching and about great instructional practices. And, it's kind of baffling to me sometimes that we are still so caught up in this idea that what needs to change is the students. We need to change the students' behavior. We need to alter how the students show up in these classes. And I don't know, that's just confusing to me. I think that the issue really is not, hey, students, put your laptops away. It's, hey, students, know when to take the right tool for the right job. And hey, lecturer, maybe you shouldn't be lecturing right now. Maybe lecture isn't the only way to teach your college level class. I just think that it's very interesting that that's still where we're headed. And it's so easy to, to say, oh, handwritten notes with technology is the bad thing here, and we should just put it away. And it's this very all or nothing. That's the other issue that I have is, we have this very all or nothing kind of mentality about technology. And I just don't see it that way. When I'm using technology, I often have technology of several kinds, and I have paper and pen, and I might be drawing something or, writing notes and typing something and looking something up. And that's actually how I stay actively engaged in my learning, especially if it's a more lecture type situation where I'm just, listening, because that helps me to actively listen. When I hear keywords or things that, I want to make sure that I understand, I can look them up. And it's not this thing of like, oh, I'm going to star something so I can look it up later. Like I can look it up right then, and then I can stay engaged in what's going on rather than it being, completely ahead of me. And I just sort of am now basically just taking notes on something that I can't be processing and thinking about. So I don't know, I really wish that we would stop approaching technology and teaching and learning in this way, in this very black and white sort of. Technology is either good or it's bad, but at the end of the day, it's the student that needs to change their behavior. I think that it's so much more than that. I think that students are one piece of it, but so are teachers, and so are the, sort of the institutions who are creating these systems and who have been in these systems for so long. It talks a lot about students did better when they were, on recall tests. So the quote was, "The more words the students copied verbatim, the worse they performed on recall tests." Okay, well, again, I go back to, why are we having recall tests? Like, how is that in any way, shape, or form a representation of what these students are going into in their jobs, in their careers? Yes, there are some jobs and careers where you need to have memorized certain facts. You need to have, certain things that you can recall very quickly. I'm all about that. But those kinds of things are not the kinds of things that you're learning from a lecture necessarily, that, it's not someone standing there and talking at you. Those are the kinds of things that you're reading about and you're learning, and you're needing to recall that information quickly. But again, why not learn it in an active way where you can really be latching onto that content and making it your own, so that then when you're in that situation, you can recall it. The idea that we should be judging whether students, or talking about like students doing better or worse on recall tests, to me is sort of missing the point entirely. I also noticed that they were talking about the way that they did the study is that they were showing college students TED Talks. And I thought that was very interesting too, because what that brought up for me is, they were talking about that students were using their technology to take notes verbatim, rather than the students who took longhand notes were able to, summarize better and recall that information later better. But the thing that I thought about with the TED Talks is that those are videos. And so that's a very unique kind of lecture situation because it's on video. And so you can pause and you can rewind and you can fast forward and you can speed it up or slow it down. And I actually love TED Talks. I really enjoy TED Talks. And then I was also thinking about, there are a lot of videos that I watch that are essentially someone talking to me. I really enjoy vlogs, and I watch TED Talks and other lectures fairly regularly and really get a lot out of them. But the thing that I love so much about them is that when somebody says something that resonates with me, I can pause. I can stop and I can think about it, and I can really make meaning of what was just said and think about why it hit me so hard. Or, I can stop and go look something up and then come back to the video. A lot of times I want to, I'll write a blog or be sharing that video outside of the initial platform that I'm watching it on, and I want to be able to put a quote or two that really resonated with me. And so I love video for the fact that I can pause, and I use my computer because it's too slow to write it out. I use my computer so that I can type the quote and make sure that I have the quote correct before I'm citing that somewhere else. So I actually, in those cases, I really like having access to technology for taking notes because it's a quote and I do want it verbatim, and I can capture the essence of what's being said really quickly as I'm sort of processing it. So I find that it's actually more helpful to have access to technology to type rather than relying on writing it. And then it's also helpful because I'm able to copy and paste and put it into whatever platforms I want to share it on. So those are just some of the things that I was thinking about. But I really wish that we would stop talking about why we should be teaching students better note-taking strategies in lectures so that they can recall facts and information better. And don't get me wrong, I think that there is great power in a strong lecture, and I've seen some amazing lecturers who can really grab an audience, and they're great storytellers, and the way that they help students understand information in a different way is really wonderful. And so I'm not saying that lecture is obsolete. I'm just saying that I think that we're focusing on the wrong things, and I think that just like I wish that more students were being encouraged to stop and look at which tool is right for the task at hand, I wish that more teachers and more facilitators of learning were being asked to stop and think about what is the right tool for the job that they are trying to do, which is ultimately to teach students who are able to go out into the world and use the content in meaningful ways that is going to be not just bettering themselves and their careers, but really making our world a better place because they're able to apply the knowledge that they have and, really do so in a very thoughtful way. So those are just some of my thoughts on that article. If you have ideas or things that you want to share about that article, I would love to hear them. I am going to put a link to the direct article in the notes, and I hope everybody's doing well, and I will talk to you all tomorrow.